Hello, and welcome to our lesson on plan risk responses. This segment will cover decision-making on risk responses. Selecting the optimal risk response often involves evaluating multiple options to choose the strategy most likely to be effective for each identified risk. While performing that, we need to utilize structured decision-making techniques, such as decision trees or decision-making matrices, to aid in evaluating alternatives and selecting the best response to each risk. Multi-criteria decision-making, MCDM techniques, play a vital role in selecting the most suitable risk response plans for a project. These methods enable project managers and stakeholders to evaluate various response strategies based on multiple criteria and make informed decisions that align with project objectives. Several criteria are commonly used in MCDM for risk response plan selection. Effectiveness. This criterion assesses the ability of each response plan to address the identified risks adequately. Effectiveness considers how well the proposed strategies mitigate threats or capitalize on opportunities to achieve desired project outcomes. Feasibility. Feasibility evaluates the practicality and viability of implementing each response plan within the project's constraints, such as budget, timeline, resources, and technical capabilities. Plans that are realistic and executable within the project context score higher on this criterion. Cost. Cost examines the financial implications associated with implementing each response plan. It includes direct costs, such as investment in resources or technology, as well as indirect costs like potential disruptions to project schedules or additional expenses incurred during implementation. Time. Time evaluates the speed and efficiency of implementing each response plan. It considers factors such as the duration required to deploy the strategy, its impact on project timelines, and whether it aligns with project milestones and deadlines. Risk reduction. This criterion measures the extent to which each response plan reduces overall project risk exposure. Plans that effectively mitigate threats or exploit opportunities while minimizing residual risks receive higher scores in this category. Stakeholder acceptance. Stakeholder acceptance assesses the level of support and agreement among key project stakeholders regarding the proposed response plans. Plans that align with stakeholder interests, expectations, and risk tolerance are more likely to gain acceptance and support. Resource allocation. Resource allocation evaluates the allocation of project resources, including manpower, materials, and equipment, required to implement each response plan. It considers whether the plan optimizes resource utilization and minimizes waste or overutilization. By considering these criteria, project teams can systematically evaluate and compare alternative risk response plans, identify trade-offs, and select the most appropriate strategies to manage project risks effectively while maximizing project success. Decision matrix analysis are commonly employed to facilitate this decision-making process. This table is an example of a multi-criteria analysis matrix that has 5 elements to consider: effectiveness, feasibility, cost, time, and resources. Each of these elements is given a score from 1 being very low to 5 being very high by the people involved in the decision-making, and a total score is calculated for each element. For each risk, the option with the highest score is the optimal option. Note that, in the below example, all elements have the same weight. We can add weights to elements to highlight their importance and calculate a weighted average total score. Decision trees are powerful tools used in risk management to aid in the selection of appropriate response plans. They provide a systematic framework for evaluating various response options based on probabilistic outcomes and associated consequences. Decision trees consider multiple criteria to assess the potential effectiveness and feasibility of each response plan. Here's how decision trees can be utilized for risk response plan selection, highlighting the criteria used. Probability of occurrence. Decision trees begin by assessing the probability of each risk event occurring. This criterion evaluates the likelihood of encountering specific risks based on historical data, expert judgment, or predictive modeling. Risks with higher probabilities of occurrence are prioritized for response planning. Severity of impact. The severity criterion examines the potential consequences or impact of each risk event on project objectives. It considers factors such as the magnitude of financial loss, schedule delays, quality degradation, or reputational damage resulting from the occurrence of the risk. Risks with significant adverse impacts warrant more comprehensive response plans. Cost of response. Decision trees incorporate the cost associated with implementing each response plan. This criterion evaluates the financial resources required to execute the selected strategies, including upfront investments, ongoing operational expenses, and potential mitigation costs. Response plans with lower implementation costs are preferred, provided they effectively mitigate the risk. Time to implement. Time considerations assess the speed and efficiency of implementing each response plan. This criterion evaluates the duration required to deploy the strategy and its alignment with project timelines. Response plans that can be implemented swiftly without adversely affecting project schedules are prioritized. Risk reduction potential. Decision trees analyze the extent to which each response plan reduces overall project risk exposure. This criterion measures the effectiveness of the selected strategies in mitigating the probability or impact of identified risks. Response plans that offer substantial risk reduction potential are favored. Resource availability. Resource availability examines the availability of necessary resources, such as manpower, expertise, technology, or infrastructure, required to implement each response plan. This criterion assesses whether the project possesses the requisite resources or if additional investments are necessary to execute the strategy effectively. Stakeholder acceptance. Decision trees consider stakeholder acceptance as a crucial criterion for response plan selection. This criterion evaluates the level of support and agreement among key project stakeholders regarding the proposed strategies. Response plans that align with stakeholder interests, expectations, and risk tolerance are prioritized. By incorporating these criteria into decision trees, project teams can systematically evaluate and compare alternative response plans, identify the most appropriate strategies to manage project risks effectively, and enhance the likelihood of project success. Decision trees provide a visual representation of the decision-making process, enabling stakeholders to understand the trade-offs between different response options and make informed choices to safeguard project objectives. This is the end of this segment of our lesson. In the next segment, we will discuss contingency planning and impact on other project management areas. This course is presented to you by South Europe College. Thank you for listening, and see you on our next segment.